So our guest this week, I have to be honest, I am huge fans of their work. I'm not the guy who's listening to 7 different fantasy football podcasts, but with fantasy drafts coming up this weekend and so many tweets and texts I'm getting about, oh crap, fantasy draft time. I thought it'd be fun to have on my favorite fantasy football podcast host. These guys do it 3 times a week. They do it over on The Ringer, and I really enjoy their rapport and also their information. Craig Horlbeck, Danny Kelly, Danny Heifetz. They're the gentlemen from The Ringer Fantasy Football Show. Gentlemen, welcome to the season with Peter Schrager.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Shregs, it's great to be back, Shregs. I've missed you.
Let's explain our history, Craig. So I really love you. I think you're awesome at what you do. And now I listen to you not only on this podcast, but on the Town podcast, where you're always giving your thoughts to Matt Maloney, and you're giving like a little different generation than him, maybe one that's more the target audience at times. But also on the Rewatchable, like you've blown up quite a bit. You got married. You're a fully grown man. But you and we met 2 years ago at the height of the pandemic. And if you want to tell the listeners our relationship, how it blossomed, I'm here to listen as well.
Sure. Yeah. During the pandemic, we did a show called Flying Coach with me, Shregs, and the one and only Sean McVay on the Ringer Podcast Network. 10 episodes with Sean, Schrager, and all the coolest coaches, all their best friends from around the league. And it's still up on the Ringer Podcast Network. You can go listen to it right now. I highly recommend it, specifically the Shanahan episode. Great episode. And
so good. Dude, yeah. I'll fly Delta, and they have like a little section on the Delta, and it says podcasts, and those Flying Coach episodes are sitting there on the plane, and I'm so proud of them. It's crazy. The story I love to tell, though, is obviously you sent equipment to both me and Sean. I get the equipment, set it up, no problem. Here's the NFL's Coach of the Year, and what had to happen?
He needed a personal visit from myself to come and set his equipment up. Which, listen, I was happy to do. I was happy to be there and help him out. So he wasn't as bad as Pete Carroll, though. So
Pete Carroll the year before, he needed a lot of help? Yeah.
McVay a little more savvy than Carroll technologically.
Yeah, both will be going at it in the NFC West. All right, so your podcast, it's 3 guys. You talk football, but you talk life. You talk all sorts of stuff. And I like it because it's not so numbers banging you over the head with the term ADP, and it's not so much, it's more about the lifestyle of playing fantasy football. Danny Kelly, you've been an NFL writer for years. This feels like a really good groove for you. I know you're so great on the NFL draft. Why would you say that this podcast is unique to other fantasy football pods?
I'm sorry, I lost you guys. I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
You know what? That kind of rapport right there, I think that's it right there, Peter. That's the key.
You could not have written that better.
Wit. It's a dynamic.
Danny, I served you up so nicely. I'm like, you're one of the draft experts when it comes to April. Like, I'm reading your guide. I think you're really excellent. And now you've got this great role with these guys.
What separates you guys from the rest?
That was the question. It was such a great, serve you up, and you honestly just your headphones fell out. Like, what happened?
He's just
so
old.
Internet.
He's just losing his
I've never lost internet before like that. I swear that's the first time that's ever happened. Thank you.
I'll
for
answer
that
it for him. I'll just say, DK,
Yeah.
I will just step in and say I do think that's ironic that he didn't hear that, because I will say that honestly the show flows because DK has like the humility. DK's, no offense, but he's 40 years old, and Craig and I are just kind of starting as 2 puppies nipping at his heels, and DK had the humility to actually listen to things we had to say. And the best compliment we get is people ask us, "Oh, so you guys were friends?" and they gave you a podcast. Like, we actually became friends doing the show.
Yeah.
And we all have like wildly different backgrounds, and I think what's different between us and other fantasy shows, it's not better, it's not worse. It's like other fantasy shows are fantasy experts, and we all none of us really came up as fantasy football experts at all. So I think we just have different kinds of conversations. Also, we all like the same movies.
Danny, I also have this thing, and you guys do reference to movies all the time, and it's great, but what is a fantasy expert? This is my take, because I could get on my soapbox here. For years, I've been on the NFL Network, and we have guys who do a fantasy show, and they're great, and they're fun, and they do this stuff, and it's good. But then when I hear that term expert, and it's like, this certain person is better at fantasy football than this first person, like, what qualifies an expert in your eyes?
Memorizing
Injury
ADP, I guess. Yeah.
Injury luck.
I think generally when I think about a fantasy expert, I think about someone who really like understands what stats matter and what types of things to look for when you're drafting, how to find the value in ADP and like, you know, the little secrets here and there of playing on different platforms and things like that. So, you know, everybody has different opinions. There's a million opinions in fantasy. You wouldn't believe it. It's kind of like draft, you know, doing the draft stuff. It's always like everybody has a slightly different opinion about literally every player. So cutting through all that and just trying to find the right stats and trying to find the right values, I think is where you can really get an edge.
Craig, how long have you been playing fantasy football?
Since I was in middle school, 7th grade, you know, God.
A few years ago.
13 years old, so, you know, 15, 16 years ago.
Do you still have that league going or no?
I do, yeah. Me and my guys are still rolling strong there. It's we're going on, like, I think 14, 15 years this year. Which is the best kind of league is a long-standing league, in my opinion.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think
decades.
I think that's what it's all about. And you know, the message board is almost more important than who wins, if that makes sense. I feel like the greatest jokes are from those message boards, and they're year-long things. And like that's sometimes what's lost when we get into this fantasy football world. That yes, it's about, you know, who's going to win, but it's not so much about who wins week to week. It's about the actual fun along the way. I sound like a high school yearbook right now.
No, it's
it
true
is the
though.
friends we
Like,
made along the way. Yeah,
it is true. I mean, to your point, if there's anyone listening who plays fantasy, or if you don't play fantasy, they've never gotten the appeal. I think it's actually really simple. And what we always try to keep in mind with the show is that, not to get too real, but since you brought up high school yearbooks, the reality is that fantasy football is the best way for adult American men to stay in touch as they get in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond.
We talk about this all the time. It's like our new religion is like, it's the way we gather. It's the way we like hang out. You know, nowadays we all sit in our houses online and stuff like that. There's nowhere to like really congregate. And fantasy football is the best way to stay in touch with people who you don't live near anymore.
Yeah,
it's
also
people get married, kids, and then there's a schedule. It's like the games. Everything's at the same time of the year. It really is about, like, it's kind of like the kitchen island where friend groups can stay together virtually.
Yes, it is true. Like, you know, you have that calendar, and it's like summer, you won't talk to these people at all, and everyone's on their trips, and everyone's working, whatever. And then that September 1st week starts, and the kickoff goes, and all of a sudden you're on a text chain with the same guys you've been on a text chain with for 20 straight years.
It's like you never left. Yeah,
it is. All right, but you guys do follow it really closely day to day. So I wanted to give up some topics for viewers or listeners who are tuning in to be like, all right, I got my draft this weekend. I'm not necessarily studying, you know, every NFL Network show and learning what Anthony Richardson's doing on a down-to-down basis. But you guys have put the work in. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some topics, and I want answers from each of you guys, which are going to serve as tips and clues for my listeners who are doing their drafts this weekend. Are we good?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's start off. We'll go Danny Heifetz first. Your fantasy football sleeper of the year is who?
Gabe Davis for the Bills. It's the most
Let's go.
classic.
Empty the bag.
There we go. It's the classic post-type sleeper, man. Gabe Dave, again, he was kind of too hyped up last year. And again, he was going like a top 60 pick. People saw the 4-touchdown game in the playoffs, 13-second game against the Chiefs. People, including us, got a little too overhyped. And look, the reality is, didn't have a great season. Kind of had this nagging, I think it was groin injury or hamstring early in the season. He had one great game against the Steelers. Sorry, Craig. And then, honestly, he was pretty terrible. Here's the thing. Gabe Davis is now going outside the top 100, basically. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. He's still huge. He's still fast. He's still the deep threat for the Bills. The only thing they've added is Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, the first rounder, who, if anything, is going to help Gabe Davis by working underneath. But the reality is this is still Josh Allen's deep threat. The only difference is he's going 5, 6, maybe 7 rounds later, and it's exactly the point in your draft where you're pivoting from more reliable guys to actually I want home run threats. I'm trying to home run or strike out when you get outside the top 100. And Gabe Davis, to me, is like the definition of people who had him last year were upset, and now he's too cheap.
They hold it against him for the following draft. Say, I'm not going to do that again. It used to happen with guys who would get injured. Like you draft Fred Taylor, and you'd hope draft him in the first round. I'm dating you guys. This is before you were born, probably. And you draft Fred Taylor, and you're like, he's good. And then Freddie would get hurt like week 8, and you're like, I'm not doing it again next year. And then you hold it against him, and it's probably not fair. Danny Kelly, your sleeper of the year this year, 2023, is whom?
I'm calling an audible today just because he was announced as this team's starter. Anthony Richardson, quarterback for the Colts. I think so. He's not so much a sleeper in like the best ball streets. I think best ball people are kind of all over him already. But in terms of just day-to-day home leagues. I still think he's being really, really underrated. He brings legitimate like top 5 potential at quarterback. And he doesn't even have to be a good passer. That's the beauty of it. Like he could be terrible. And by the way, he probably is going to be terrible as a passer this year. If you look at what Justin Fields did, he was a top 5, top 6 quarterback going down the stretch of the season.
He lost terrible. 10 games. Yeah.
They literally went to like the Navy offense. We joke about it all the time on our show. Like they passed the ball fewer than like at a lower rate than almost any team in the last 20 years. Anthony Richardson could be terrible at passing, and he could still be, top 3, top 5 quarterback just because of the rushing. The way that stats are set up in fantasy football, it really benefits quarterbacks who run. These are the types of guys that are league winners, week winners, and league winners. So Anthony Richardson, just because he can run, I think he's going to be a big-time weapon for them in the red zone, kind of like we've seen Jalen Hurts over the last few years. Jalen Hurts, double-digit rushing touchdowns the last 2 seasons. I don't think that Richardson's necessarily at Jalen Hurts' level yet, clearly, but I think that they can use him in the red zone, kind of like Cam Newton, to punch it in. I think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. I think he's going to run a lot, and I think he's going to be one of the best late-round picks that you can possibly make.
I love it. Craig, take us home. Sleeper, who you got?
Jahan Dotson, the wide receiver on the Commanders. Second-year
Let's
guy.
Hear the spiel.
First-round pick.
Let's go.
First-round pick. People forget, just because he was drafted around Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, Treylon Burks. I bet you if you ask most people, they would not expect Jahan Dotson to be a first-round pick last year. He started super hot, 4 touchdowns, 4 games, and then he got hurt, and then he came back and finished strong. So his season-long stats aren't great, which is what people look back on. Most average fantasy players are looking back on the season-long stats, and they would look at Jahan Dotson and go, oh, yeah, he wasn't as good as Terry McLaurin last year. But in reality, the final 5 games of the season when they were both healthy, he was beating McLaurin in all the nerdy stats that everybody likes. Your targets per route run, the yards per route run, red zone target share, all of that stuff. Straight up targets, he had more than Terry McLaurin in the last 5 games of the season. Now we got Eric Bieniemy in. I like Sam Howell and Brissett, at least enough to make a little bit of a jump. And receivers typically make the biggest jump between year 1 and year 2. Dotson's also just an eye test guy. When you watch him, you're like, this guy has it. And you can get him around 90th, 100th in your draft right now. I love Dotson.
I loved the conversation you guys had on your podcast last week, and you did it about guys who might be in the twilights of their NFL careers, and because people just want the young, fresh, new face, they don't draft, but then year after year can still deliver. I'm going to call this the Keenan Allen Award, where he's still around, he still puts up numbers, and yet you look at these top 20 wide receivers, Keenan Allen never in the list, but every year finishes that high. Why don't we go around the horn and you each give one of those names, a guy that you know is going to deliver and yet probably will not be drafted as high as he should. Danny Heifetz, let's start with you, bud.
Well, I guess Travis Kelce doesn't count because he's still a first-rounder. I do want to shout out that the only
Would you take Travis Kelce in the first round? Is that happening? People take him in the first round?
Yeah, I will, because here's the thing. Literally the only argument against Travis Kelce, literally, is that he's 34 years old and people are afraid of him bottoming out. The reality is
age
Travis
is just
Kelce
a number, guys. Look at you, Schrager, DK. You look better than ever.
I feel
Come
great.
on.
My hair's
the
great.
meta of this conversation is that when Craig and I were in our mid-20s, we hated players as they're 30. Now Craig and I are almost 30, and we're like, you know what's fine? Old players. 30 is just
It's
a
like when
number.
George. It's like when George Clooney turned 50, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to settle down. Like I'm actually okay with marrying somebody.
Now it's his time. Yeah.
He's like, you know what? It's okay.
And so it's like in my younger days, I was pretty terrified to take Derrick Henry or Travis Kelce because I'm like 30. My God, he must have like a mortgage or something. But like Kelce hasn't missed a game to injury. He had COVID and he had they get benched in week 17 because they're always clinching.
Stop
playoffs.
saying it. You keep jinxing.
I know. Sorry, I'm knock on wood. I got it. Yeah, but the Kelce hasn't missed a game to injury. Knocking on wood, in a decade. It's like Jamar Chase is going ahead of him. He missed games last year. Cooper Kupp missed games last year. Like all the players that are supposedly younger and safer have been injured at some point. Kelce hasn't, so I'm probably giving him the Conahura, as they would say.
Yeah,
but,
nice.
To me, Kelce, it's like buying Apple stock. It's like this is the safest thing there is.
I'm here for the Yiddish. Danny Kelly, what about you? Who's the guy that you see and you're like, come on?
My guy this year is DeAndre Hopkins.
Really? With Tannehill in that offense? Okay,
so
go on.
I actually like Tannehill. I think I'm the last person on Tannehill Island. I think he's solid. I don't think he's like great.
Tannehill, that's well done.
It was right there, and I freaking missed it. Yeah.
Your audio.
But yeah, I mean, to me, like he's really solid. I don't think he's like great or anything, but he's still a solid veteran. I think he's going to feed a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. I think there's a lot of question marks, outside of Hopkins in terms of what we're going to expect from this offense. Obviously, Treylon Burks is there, and he's an up-and-coming guy, but he's still young. Still very inexperienced, and I think Hopkins is just going to get force-fed in this offense. Last year, this was wild to me when I found this stat. Last year, in the 9 games that Hopkins played, he averaged 10.7 targets per game.
He was really good.
The only receivers who had more targets per game than him are Chase, Kupp, and Jefferson. Like the first 5 picks. So he's definitely getting older, but his game has never really been built on speed or explosiveness. It's always about body positioning, old man at the Y type. Post a guy up and skyhook him. And Hopkins
footwork,
is kind of that
fundamentals.
Footwork, yeah, get low
physicality.
base, boxing out. So I don't know.
Low
to me,
man wins.
He's just so good. He's I heard Tannehill called him vintage Hopkins the other day. I think he's just going to have a really big year, and people are forgetting about him because he's a little older and he switched teams, which that's valid. But I still think he's going to be the focal point of this passing game.
Craig,
tell me why Derrick Henry's going in the second round. What's changed?
talk about it. Let's go.
He had 350 carries last year, played the entire season, and was the 3rd best running back in fantasy. And everyone's just like, I'm good. He's 28. No thanks. It's like
too
Leo
old.
DiCaprio when a girl turns 26. He's like, I'm out. Give me a reason why. Nothing's changed. He's still Derrick Henry. We're all obsessed with this idea now that as running backs enter their late 20s, they just, I think it's a misnomer. Essentially, we're betting on science, We're betting on these phenomenal athletes preparing their bodies and actually taking advantage of the technological advancement we have now. And Derrick Henry's 28 years old, and if I'm going to bet on anybody to actually make it to their 30s and not fall off, I'm going to pick the guy who gets 350 carries every single year and continues to be a top 5 running back in fantasy. And he's just sitting there in the second round now because he's old. It's age shaming, really.
14th round starts rolling around, and it's now you can take a little. You already took your kicker. You already took your defense. You got maybe 2 more picks left to go, and you want to take a rookie. I'm going to go around the horn. Craig, we'll start with you. Give me a rookie that might still be around then that you're looking at. Maybe he's not the 1st or 2nd overall pick, but it's a guy that you got your eye on.
Interesting, a rookie. Can I go with? I think I want to go with the tight end position here. I like 2 guys. I like Luke Musgrave and I like
Michael
Jake
Mayer?
Ferguson.
Ferguson.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about
Second-year
Musgrave
guy.
and Ferguson.
Oh, Ferguson's 2nd-year guy. Musgrave rookie.
Yeah.
I'll stick with
Ferguson's
Musgrave.
Cowboys, right? He was 2nd-year guy.
Yeah. Sticking with Musgrave then. When you're getting a rookie tight end, they don't typically work out. But what I like about Musgrave is, unlike a lot of other tight ends, he's just playing receiver. He doesn't have to learn the blocking half of the offense. And I like guys, much like a Dalton Kincaid, who are going to be split out and are going to be running routes. And if you look at the Green Bay offense, I mean, it's an entirely new young offense. There's not a lot of established guys. You got Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and you got Musgrave. So if you're going to take a shot, if you believe in Jordan Love, who's looked great this offseason and in the preseason, Musgrave is a guy who could kind of sneaky start his rookie year hot, kind of like a Pat Fryer move.
Okay. DK, who do you got? Rookie, you got your eyes on.
Oh, man, there's so many of them. I could just go down the list. I'm going to shout out a guy who's kind of gotten – people are not super excited about him based on what happened in preseason week 1, and that's Devon A-Chain for the Dolphins because he was playing – he was like 4th or 5th on the depth chart in this game. He's playing into the 4th quarter. Typically, these are not great signs for rookie running backs. But I will say, if you watch the games like I did, like
He's
if
a
you're
beast, dude.
a huge sicko and you watch that game, he was running vertical routes. He caught 4 passes for 41 yards. He actually led the Dolphins in receiving in this game. He caught a pass out of the backfield up the sideline for a chunk gain. He caught a Texas route over the middle of the field for like a 10-yard gain. He was being used in exactly the type of way we want him to be used, which is vertical pass catching role. And obviously, like, Myles Gaskin's still there. They still got Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson. He's got some hurdles to clear. I think,
but they don't have Dalvin Cook, which is a good sign that they must have liked what they had in house.
I was a little nervous that Dalvin Cook was going to come in and ruin my dreams, but even though he was playing with like the 5th stringers into the 4th quarter, I'm sticking with it. Devon A-Chain, midway through the year, I think he's going to start being really, really useful for them. And again, he's being used in the way that you want him to be used, which is as a pass catcher, explosive pass catcher. So
Talladega speed, baby.
Hot, nasty, badass speed, and that's what he's got. So I just love this
Sounds so
offense,
good
too.
coming out of your mouth. Danny, what about you, my friend?
There's a rookie. I really love Jordan Addison, the rookie receiver for the Vikings. I think that he has not been going as high. He's basically like a top 100 player, depending where you look, depending on the platform or website you use. 80th, 100th, 105th, 75th. It's a huge range. But I think he's really underrated because I think as a pure regular NFL prospect, he's undersized. I get all that. He's not a prototypical number one receiver. I think he's being unfairly dinged for that in fantasy because Jordan Addison is the perfect complement to Justin Jefferson. It reminds me a little bit of when Juju Smith-Schuster had an incredible rookie season behind Antonio Brown. Calvin Ridley. I remember Julio Jones was incredible for the Falcons, but he couldn't score touchdowns. Calvin Ridley comes in as a rookie, has like 5 touchdowns in like 5 games behind Julio Jones. I feel that Jordan Addison will have that type of impact disproportionate to his skill level because he's refined, he's a precise route runner, he's polished in a way that makes up for his lack of physical gifts that will basically pay dividends immediately. And I think he's going to soak. I mean, Adam Thielen, no offense to the guy, was a little dusty last year, and I think Addison's going to come in and just vacuum up behind Justin Jefferson. It's kind of it's just an incredibly massive opportunity to be around this guy who's always doubled, and I think he's going to just eat.
Did you see his catch the other day? He had like a
nice
sideline diving
swag.
toe touch catch. They didn't even review it. They called him out. They didn't even review it, but he made the most incredible catch that just it's the preseason that doesn't count, so it doesn't matter, but whatever. It was
Schrager,
an amazing catch.
Speaking of preseason, you ask how being a fantasy expert works. Here's how it works. College statistics, preseason plays, if they confirm what you already believe, they're very important and representative. And if they don't, if they go against what you already think, then they're meaningless. And Jordan Addison had 1,600 yards in college 2 years ago and won the best receiver in college football award, and then had that catch. So there you go. I must already be right.
I'm going to give a note. Zay Flowers might be the best wide receiver out of this bunch. It might do it. I don't know if he's going to put up the best numbers, and I don't know how this helps for fantasy. What I'm learning from Zay Flowers is that he's unguardable because of his footwork and speed, and he might just be drawing a lot of pass interference calls. Honestly, that's what I'm told. So, like, if you're expecting 100 catches, that might not be it. But he will be a huge function of the Ravens' offense. And I see a lot of people drafting him really high. I don't know if his numbers are going to be high. I just know he's going to be a pain in the ass to cover. And that's like one of those things in fantasy where here's the arbitrage where, yes, he might be our offensive rookie of the year, but no, his numbers might not be as crazy as Justin Jefferson's or Jamar Chase's.
I like that one too. He's so good. There's a reason a lot of people were comparing him to like Antonio Brown when you're watching the tape. Like his feet are so fast, his route running so sudden and twitchy. I agree with you though. Like I don't know exactly what his role is going to be like in that Ravens offense. We don't even know what this Ravens offense is really going to look like at all. So there's a lot of variance potential there. But yeah, he's a really good player.
All right, strategy-wise, say I'm doing my fantasy draft. I know which players are good, but every year it's different. Some year it's like you have to get those 2 running backs early because there's a big drop-off. Some years it's you need the wide receiver 1 because after the first few of them it's a drop-off. Craig, I know you've been studying the grids and the cheat sheets. What's the strategy this year? Is in the first round, is it important to get what? And when you do that snake draft, what are you trying to come out of here? Because I know there's a drop-off at each position at some point.
So if you're playing in a league with 1 quarterback, what we kind of like to do this year is basically get an elite player from every single position group. This year is a really unique year because running backs are kind of going late, quarterbacks are hotter than ever, and then you have Travis Kelce who's just miles away from every other tight end. So what we kind of suggest is get one from each position. Start your draft with the Travis Kelce, then move on, get an elite running back like a Derrick Henry. 3rd round, you can get yourself an elite quarterback like a Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes, and then you can still get a great receiver. If you can start your draft with 4 players, 4 different positions, like a DeAndre Hopkins, DK's guy. I mean, you can start your draft with Travis Kelce, Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes, and DeAndre Hopkins. You get 4 Hall of Famers in 4 rounds, as long as you're not an age bias guy like all those out there. But I kind of like mixing it up, spreading the wealth this year specifically.
DK, you agree?
Oh, yeah, totally. I really like this year's 2nd-round running backs. So I personally believe grabbing a guy like Kelce or one of the elite receivers in round 1 and then getting a Pollard or Josh Jacobs in round 2. I think Jacobs has fallen because there's some uncertainty about whether he's going to play. I think at the end of the day, he's probably going to play.
He'll be there.
So I think, but Tony Pollard to me is like my favorite 2nd-round pick right now. I just think he has through-the-roof potential. He's such a good player, so explosive, and they're going to use him in the right way. He was already, such a elite producer last year when they had Zeke in town, and now it's his offense and his backfield. So to me, Tony Pollard is sort of a linchpin guy that I just really like in that second round. So
in the second round, Danny, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Danny Kelly where it's kind of flipped. I feel like you used to take your top running back in the first round and then you get a great receiver in the second. Now it's basically you can pretty much get an elite receiver in the first round. You come back around, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, AB, Saquon. Those guys used to go in the first. It's kind of like the same top 20, top 24, but now just the receivers and running backs have flipped spots. That's like
because everybody realized that wide receivers are safer. Running backs get hurt all the time, and you can depend on Justin Jefferson, your Tyreek Hills, your Jamar Chases. Like if you don't want to lose your draft in the first round, you take a wide receiver because by the end of the year, odds are one of the guys you draft in the top 5 is probably going to finish in the top 5.
Yeah, and what about quarterbacks? I know you said that you want an elite one. Like, is it crazy to take Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts in the first round this year?
You don't have to take
first round's
second,
a little steep.
We start our rank. You have fantasyfootball.theringer.com. We have our rankings. We have our top 200. We have upsides, downsides for every player. And the bottom line on all these guys basically is we have our quarterbacks right around the third round. Basically, we've got a couple dozen truly special players. It's Travis Kelce and a bunch of running backs, receivers. And then at that point, as Craig said, lock in those quarterbacks where you're basically getting an elite floor. Jalen Hurts, 18 rushing touchdowns in 18 games last year, including the playoffs. The floor, not just the ceiling, is crazy. Josh Allen, the running, he could lead the league in rushing touchdowns or receiving or passing touchdowns, and Mahomes is Mahomes. And I think that at that point, elite floors in the first few rounds, and then after that, you're chasing elite ceilings. So if you miss out on Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson in this new offense has an elite ceiling. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, those guys have truly elite potential. And I think that if you're stacking that at quarterback, Darren Waller has an elite ceiling at tight end. And I think that's, Scott Barrett has done great stuff at a great website called Fantasy Points where elite ceilings win you your league. They win weeks, they win leagues. And I think elite floors in the first 3 rounds and then next making up where you didn't get it with elite ceilings.
Where are you guys at, DK? I'll start. Where are you guys at with Kyle Pitts? I think everyone took him in the first round or second round last year, and now it's almost like you wouldn't be able to touch him. It's like, how could you?
I think, at least for Craig and I think we kind of hate him at this point. Like nothing that he's actually done personally that is his fault. It just is so hard to
someone else's problem. Like
exactly. I'm just like washing my hands of that.
A toxic relationship that I don't want to be.
I just don't want to have to deal. I don't want to have to think about him anymore. He might be the best tight end in the NFL in 2 years.
God bless him, right? Like I hope it for him. I just don't want him on my fantasy team.
I just don't want to think
it's
about
not you, it's me.
I'm unfriending him on Facebook, so I don't have to look at his feed. This is like old school boomer talk. But
yeah, you bet.
I get it though.
Well, I think one of the best, most charming aspects of the three of us dynamic is that DK, in his older wisdom, now that he's in his 40s, doesn't have the energy, doesn't allow toxic people in his life, and doesn't have Michael Thomas, out. Kyle Pitts, people who just are kind of a drain on your energy. DK's just like, I don't have time for you anymore.
Yeah. All right, quickly, I'm going to go around. You guys tell me yay or nay. I'm going to mention some things about fantasy football. I'm going to put you on the spot. Craig, we'll start with you. Auction draft, yay or nay?
Yay, you got to do it.
Explain. Make the case for why someone should scrap the old snake draft that takes 1 minute and is easy enough to do to go to the auction thing, which seems unbearable.
Let's say Justin Jefferson's your favorite player in fantasy football, and then you're eagerly awaiting what draft pick you're going to get. You're praying you get the first or second pick, and then the name gets drawn out of the hat and you have the 10th. That terrible feeling of, well, I guess I won't have Justin Jefferson this year. That doesn't happen in an auction draft. You can spend your money on any player you want. You can get Justin Jefferson and Christian McCaffrey you want. It's a lot more flexibility. Every single pick you are involved in. I love it.
Okay, DK, individual defensive players, are we yay or nay?
I've been a nay on that one. It's hard enough like keeping track of all offensive players. Like I don't know, like adding all that to the plate is a bit much for me. I don't track it enough, and I've never really done it. I'm an old guy. Can't teach me new tricks. I don't really know. I'm not into that.
Danny, 2 quarterback leagues where there's 2 quarterbacks starting, in yay or nay?
I'm totally in. At the end of the day, it's very, very silly to me that in real life running backs can't get paid, and like Jonathan Taylor isn't getting a contract while Jim Irsay's trying to fly an orca to SeaWorld for $20 million. But in fantasy, we have running back, like 10, 12 running backs come off the board before Patrick Mahomes. In a 2-quarterback league, the first picks are Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. That's real life. So I like 2-quarterback leagues.
I love that. Craig, 10-team leagues, yay or nay? It seems very light.
That's as light as I'll go. 8 is ridiculous. 10 is where I draw the line. 10 is okay. 12 is ideal. 14 is fine. 16 is too big.
Yeah.
Okay. DK, non-PPR leagues where we don't keep track of receptions. We just do yards.
Strongly against. Archaic. Stone Age.
Morally opposed.
If you're into that, I hate you.
Danny, I'm going to tell you one that my league that I've been a part of for 23 years. We don't do flex. We don't believe in it. We think it's silly. There's no such thing as flex. Danny Heifetz, flex position, which seems like such a bailout. Yay or nay?
I love
leading the
flex.
witness.
I've never
Get
heard
rid
of
of
that.
flex. What is flex?
I love it.
Dumbest crap.
This is a great take. It's like,
I've
be
never heard
decisive.
that.
Who are you? You know what flex would be good for? Flex should be for like the 4 players who are like Cordero Patterson can play in the flex. That's it.
Sure.
The actual flex players. Ooh, that's good.
Debo
Taysom
Samuel,
Hill.
Cordero Patterson,
Yes.
Taysom Hill, and Jameer Gibbs can play flex.
Exactly.
I hate the flex. I never heard of the flex until I came on to Good Morning Football and I kept on hearing the word flex. I'm like, what the heck is flex? They're like, well, it could be any position. It's like a wild card. I'm like, well, that's not real.
I love
Dumbest thing. Flex. All right. Team defenses counting. Craig, yay or nay?
I go back and forth. I'm fine with it. I prefer a team defense over a kicker. So if I had to choose, I'd take the defense. It's fun to root for a defense.
Okay. DK, 2-point conversions and that stuff counting, like a missed 2. Okay, let's read this. DK, I'll ask you. Counting every little thing, like a 2-point conversion has a metric, or a batted down pass has a metric. Like at some point, there's got to be a limit.
The 40-yard completion bonus.
Yes, I hate that. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm judging. DK, you go.
I was going to say the like you get a bonus for having 100 yards. I've played in a few leagues where like a running back, if he gets 100 yards, gets a bonus. I think there's a time and a place for it. For my home league, for like most of my leagues, I don't really want that. I do think it's fun to like sprinkle that in every once in a while if you're like in a tournament or something like that. But generally speaking, I like pretty standard scoring settings.
DK, how many of your 23 leagues do you use the 100-yard bonus?
Probably none right now, I would say. But I'm open to it in like 1 or 2 leagues just because to mix it up and make it fun.
All right, DK, I'm going to go back on that one with you. I just heard 23 leagues. I know that's being sarcastic.
It's not.
It's not, actually.
No, he actually is in 23 leagues.
He's in 23 leagues.
His pandemic sanity project was just drafting.
The answer, Peter, is it's not fun.
It's not fun. That's
What are
hell.
you talking about? It is
It's
so
a portfolio.
What's
I think the problem
fun about that? The whole
You
point
have-
of it is
you
to
have
root
every
for
player
your
in the
guys. Yeah,
I
and you're rooting
found-
against every player in the league.
Well, yeah.
Once-
I mean, I have so
once
many.
you-
I have so many players on my teams that I'm like,
But in your head, can you sort which team is which? I feel like I wouldn't know who to root for.
No, not really.
So you just-
I will say, here's the qualifier. 95% of my teams are dynasty leagues. So it's not day-to-day stuff that you're doing. There's not a bunch of guys on the waiver wire typically. It's like you draft a team and you develop it over years. But it's not like I'm spending a lot of time on this roster day in and day out. You know what I mean?
Can I unveil a hot take on you guys right now?
Yes.
I'm out on dynasty leagues.
Me too.
Ooh, that is the
You know
worst.
what the best?
too.
You know what the best part about fantasy football is? The
Craig,
draft.
you're in my
draft.
dynasty league.
And he's out on it. He's going to play in it. He just doesn't like it.
Kicking you
Oh,
out.
cool! I get to draft a 4th-round running back.
I'm with you,
that's
bro.
My
I
draft.
get this question all the time. Should I keep 2 out of these 7 players? I don't know. Draft a new team. I don't like it.
Draft a new team. I don't want to be parsing through 6th-round rookies to figure out who has value. That sounds terrible. You know who I want to draft? Patrick Mahomes.
Thank
Saquon
you.
Barkley. That's fun.
Danny Heifetz, people who draft in person versus people who draft online, and the riff there of the arrogance, and I'm an in-person guy, of those who roll their eyes at those who are in a Yahoo draft room and consider that a fantasy league. Go on.
All right, so this gets to what we were saying earlier about like fantasy football is about keeping in touch with your friends. People in different places obviously can't control that. You always want to draft in person if you can. If it's your friend group, you want to be in person. It's incredible. At the very least, though, you have to show up for the draft. You can't auto-draft. Auto-draft is it. Look, if you have children, you two understand this better than me. We can talk. Otherwise, it's weddings and funerals, or you better be there.
Even if it's on Zoom, that's okay. You just can't auto-draft. That's unacceptable. You're out of the league.
It's un-American.
Yeah.
The hardest part of any league, and now we're just going off because I got so many thoughts. The hardest part of any league is finding a draft time that works for everyone. If you get one of those Google Doodles going, and you come up with one time. I don't care if it's 5:00 on a Wednesday. You better not the day of say I just can't make it. That's unacceptable. You're out. You're out. We will find a replacement.
And also, pay your league dues before the draft. If you're a commissioner of a league, require everyone to pay their league dues or they cannot draft.
Is that a thing? People don't pay the league dues. You have to chase them down for the Venmo?
Yeah. I got to go hire like a fixer. I got to go hire Ray Donovan to go get the money from this guy. Yeah, there's always one of them. Yeah.
Out. Dude, there are two people I hate in a fantasy league. I feel like Austin Powers, and I'm like, there's two kinds of people I hate in this world. But the people who don't fill out that doodle, as you were saying, and then at the end, once like 9 people can make it, you're like, oh, that day doesn't work for me. My mother's visiting. And I'm like, dude, that's what we made the doodle for. The other one is the people who think that they get to veto other people's trades just grinds my gears. Like in real life, where I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot more stakes to the real life sports leagues. There's been one vetoed trade in our lifetime, and it was the Chris Paul trade because the NBA the league office owned the team, and they were like, all right, this is weird. Literally, like thousands of real life trades have been made. They all go through. This is America. You have the right to be stupid and make dumb decisions. It's not your job to run other people's stuff.
I love it. Real quick, there's a whole craze in the last 10 years of like punishments and making it go viral. And this guy ate a waffle every hour for 24 hours. This guy had to poop in a sandwich and eat it. And we all laughed and we put it on YouTube. Too sophomoric, silly, or you guys all for this? Craig, we'll start with you.
If you're coming to me, it's definitely not too sophomoric for me. I don't know how other people feel, but I'm all for it. In our league right now, the current rule is we have the loser on the trip next year. He's our butler, and he has to wear a butler
This
outfit.
is hell. This sounds like hell.
The whole weekend, he like serves us food, and he gets the worst bed, and I'm all for it, And we've actually employed a last place tournament at the end of the year for all the guys whose teams suck in like weeks 12 through 17.
I like that.
We have a last place tournament to determine who gets last. So I think last place is just as fun as first place in terms of end of year suspense.
DK, what's the craziest thing you've heard in that regard? I mean, they come up every year. They're more and more.
Man, I had a couple of friends who, one of their leagues, their like punishment or whatever for last place was they had to go like be a busker on like a sidewalk and like play music and try and get tips and things like that. Like
what's a busker?
Like
what's
busking
a busker?
is like when you're like you're on the corner like
sign?
playing like music and like try to make money that way.
You have like the open guitar case and you're
like a subway dancer, like in New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
I want to tell you one great. I want to tell you one great rule that we have in one of my leagues is if you get a 0 in any of your spots in any given week. So like say
you mean a player, like if a player puts up a 0.
Yeah, like a guy's a healthy scratch and you didn't change your lineup.
Goose egged it. Yeah, you have to record yourself shotgunning a beer and send it to the rest of the league.
Okay.
And that I think is one of the more fun rules that I have in any of my leagues.
Okay. Like it. Danny, yourself, the craziest thing you've heard?
The craziest stuff is there are leagues that you have to get a tattoo. I mean, that's great. That to me is the wildest. The wildest one we do. The one that I think works the best, and even as you get older, is our league. It's a beer mile because Thanksgiving there's always we do a flag football game on Black Friday, and it's funny because as everyone gets older, the game gets earlier and people show up with more knee braces and everyone's stretching more and more every year.
Yeah, and you're only 30, brother. Just wait.
Yeah. At the end of the game, though, we do the beer mile, which is great because there's like me, who's not the most fleet of foot, but I can drink a beer, versus like this guy who ran a 4.5 minute mile in college, but like can't chug. And like, all right, this is actually even now.
That's good. I like that. Craig, correct me if I'm wrong. Bill Simmons' league, and they always talk about it, the Shakey's league. the winner gets to vote off any person in the league, and they have to miss a year, right? I think that's pretty drastic.
This is the funniest one.
It's a 12-team league, but there's 13 members, and every year 13 people have to show up to the draft, and the previous year's winner then sits down like a dictator and goes, "You're out," and they have to get up and leave the draft.
I'm not kidding. I guess it was during the pandemic, and I was listening to Simmons a lot, like 2020, maybe 2021, and I think there was real friction between him and Sal over it. It felt like they voted Sal out, and Sal was very angry.
When Bill got voted out one year, he started a new league. Bill was like, "Whatever, I'll start my own league."
That's what it was. That's what it was. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
I'm not just saying this because, we work for Bill Simmons. I actually think Sal must have come up with that. I think that is the rule that I actually think is the funniest. It is incredible.
It's so good. And that's great. All right, guys, we're wrapping. Fantasy football is on the way. Where can we find the podcast, and what is it called, Craig, for everyone who listens to this one and wants their hardcore football news but has a draft this weekend and is like, wait a second, my pants are not ready for this. I need to get ready. Where would you go for it?
Yeah, sure. The show is called The Ringer Fantasy Football Show. It's anywhere you can find podcasts. We prefer Spotify. There's a lot of fun features on there. You can look at our guide while you listen. But yeah, The Ringer Fantasy Football Show with us 3 days a week and 4 days a week during the season.
I wish you guys well. For Danny Heifetz, Danny Kelly, Craig Horlbeck. Guys, this was awesome. We really appreciate you coming on. This is great.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for having us,
Schrags.
man.
Thanks for having us.
Beautiful. Thanks, boys.